Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to another Burlingame It's a Small Town podcast, sponsored by the Burlingame Historical Society. This is Mark Lucchese, also known as Mark at the Mic, and with me today is the owner of Pacific Auto Repair, located at 124 Highland Avenue. Pacific Auto Repair is one of Burlingame's oldest family-owned businesses, having been founded in 1923 by Herbert Vielbaum. Eventually, Herbert passed the business on to his son, Walter, and several decades later, Walter passed the business on to his son and my guest today, Gary Vielbaum. Gary is going to share some of that 101-year history and also what's taking place in the auto repair business today. Gary, thanks for being on the show today.
Oh, Mark, thanks for having me. It's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun. Gary, I'm reading your notes that you sent me, and you grew up in Belmont for a while. I guess maybe you left, your parents moved from Belmont to Burlingame when you were around 15 years old?
Yeah, about that. We started, when I was born, we grew up in Belmont and then moved to Burlingame in 1973.
Yeah. Was that to be closer to the shop, or was it just a good a chance to buy a home in Burlingame or something?
The move from Belmont to Burlingame, you
yeah.
mean? Mom wanted a bigger house.
Yeah.
But wanted to be close enough to the shop. So.
Right. Where did you guys, when you landed in Burlingame, what neighborhood? Where were you?
We were up a hillside drive on La Mesa.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
Okay. So, because Jennifer had told me she thought maybe you grew up in Mills Estate.
No, I didn't. Well, in my teenage years, we were in that would be the Mills Estate area.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, again, it was 1973.
Right.
There.
And back then, was Hillside, you went to Mills, but was there a division back then that you had to go to Mills because of, property lines or something?
I don't remember how it was divided, but at that time, the people on Hillside Drive, I think and it could be on the north side of Hillside Drive, went to Mills,
right.
And then the other folks went to Burlingame, because we thought we were going to go to Burlingame High, but at that time,
there was kind of a border. Now I think you can come and go as you please.
Yeah,
things have changed. So, tell me about your neighborhood. Tell me some things you remember about the neighborhood growing up over there. Friends, things you did.
Well, it was probably like most neighborhoods. We weren't close to the downtown area, so I had a bike, and I didn't. The trouble living where we lived, it was great when you going to wherever you were going, whether it was school or downtown, it was all downhill, and coming back was all
a struggle.
uphill.
Yeah,
it was a struggle.
Were you close to the fire department, the one that's on Hillside, or were you above that or below that?
We were above that.
Yeah, you were up there then.
Yeah,
that's like you said, it's fine coming down. So did you do most of your horsing around as a youngster or a teenager in the neighborhood, or did you go someplace, ride down to Adeline Market or what?
Well, most of my teenage years, when we moved up there, I was just a few years later, I had my car. So if I wasn't at school, and I knew a couple people in the neighborhood, but having grown up in Burlingame or Belmont rather, and then moving to Burlingame, all my childhood friends I kind of left behind. So I sort of kept to myself the first year or two when I was there. And then in high school later on, I did meet people and got to know them better. But most of the time, I would be down at the shop helping Dad on weekends or summer vacations. That's where I got my spending money. And weekdays, I had a strong interest in railroading. That's where I met Ray Tyler through that hobby.
Big railroads. Big cars, not the little HOs or whatever they are. Right. Wow.
Did a lot of railroad photography, and I've had some of my work published. Dad took pictures. Dad used to take me on railroad trips, and he took pictures of trains. That's where I got the train bug.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Do you still have that bug?
Oh yeah, a little. I've got other bugs now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, let's talk about your car that you had in high school. Was it some souped-up GTO or '57 Chevy? What were you driving?
It was a 1967 Toyota Corolla. And I was looking for a car, and Dad said, I'll get you a car. He says, I'll start you out with your car, because that's what his dad did. And that time, all I had to do was pay Dad $100. And so we found this Toyota, needed a transmission, so they did the transmission. And of course, as a kid, I looked at it, it's like, Dad, I was like, really, this is it? And he goes, yep. He goes, you take it or leave it. And I said, okay, I'll take it.
I'll take it, right.
It works.
Yeah. So when you were at Mills, though, did you hang out any place after high school? I mean, after the classes were over, did you go over to Millbrae or come down to Burlingame Avenue or Broadway or anything like that?
Well, there was a business in Burlingame on Oak Grove called Chatham Publishing, and they produced a railroad newsletter. And I started working for him because it was railroad related and gave me a little spending money, and it was real close to the shop. So when I was done with him about 5:30, then I would just ride my bike down to the shop and hang out at the shop until it was time to go home.
Yeah. So when you were hanging out at the shop, you were sort of learning things, though, weren't you?
And after school, it was more doing my homework, hanging out in the office with Dad and doing my work. I'd help him move cars in the shop. Even just before I got my driver's license, I was able to take cars out and park them in the lot and then bring them back in the shop, at the end of the day.
How many did your dad have employees at that time?
Yeah, he had, I think it was about 3 guys working for him.
Yeah. Do you still stay in touch with any of your old Mills High School buddies or anything like that?
I know one gentleman who ran Dotsonville and who's no longer there, but I do see him occasionally. And we share some common interests and other things. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Working at your dad's shop, you worked there after school, summers, and all that stuff, right?
Right.
Was that like a thing you were saying to yourself, I am not going to do this when I grow up? Oh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, I just can't do this. It's hard work. I'm going to be an attorney or something, right? I'm going to be a doctor. I can't handle this. I'm not going to have greasy hands. Or were you thinking to yourself, man, I'm going to do this. Someday my dad's going to, move on and I'm going to take over. Was that one of your aspirations or what?
I think I saw myself taking over because he took over from his dad, and I didn't mind the work. I thought it was interesting, and the more so during the summers I would work for him. But I was more the kind of the parts, go get these parts, do this, get that. It wasn't until I started the automotive program up at Skyline College in the late 70s, and we got a little more hands-on and was learning. But I didn't mind it. I didn't have a strong drive for any one thing in particular. I liked doing that, and it was there, so I thought it made sense to pursue that. There was a period where just before I started the college, I was seriously considering working for the railroad. I had several friends that were engineers, and they made good money, had flexible hours.
Right. And
I was thinking to do that, and I actually had an opportunity to get hired on the Santa Fe. I went to a job interview up in Richmond, and they called me back to start up. And I remember talking to Dad about that, and he goes, well, you really should, because I just started the program Skyline. He goes, you need to, you should finish what you started, and then if you still want to do that, pursue that. So I told the guy, no, I couldn't make it. So that sort of ended the whole railroad career.
And you stayed with the automotive
stayed with
classes
the automotive.
Up at Skyline, and one thing led to another. Do we still call guys that work on cars mechanics, or has it moved to an auto service technician?
Well, I guess to this day and age, it's probably an auto service technician. But I mean, mechanic is it's also very true because you're working with your hands. You're working with a lot of mechanical things.
Right.
So
it's not. I don't know. It's not irreverent to say, "Hey, I'm going to take it to my mechanic."
Yeah, no, not at all.
I have a tough time saying I'm going to take it to my auto service technician. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of a mouthful. I mean, I mean, in the end, we are mechanics. It's just that back when cars first started, everything was mechanical. Everything was very visceral. You'd look at things, and you'd see, hear, smell things. The only thing that was a mystery for a lot of folks was the electrical systems, which were very simple back then. Now things are very mechanical. They're just controlled by computers, so you have to have a little bit of knowledge on both.
Yeah.
Being able to look at things and figure out things, how they work mechanically, but also be able to look at things with a computer and look at data, understand what you're looking at, so you can make good choices or good decisions based on information that you gather.
Yeah. Very complicated to me, okay? I can't find the spark plug if I pull up the hood. So we're going to get into that in a minute, all right? So I want you to tell us a little bit about the history of a 101-year-old shop. Has it always been in the same location?
Always been the same location.
Okay, and that location, just so I can tell our listeners, is sort of next to the Valero gas station, or down the street from the Valero gas station on Howard in California, behind the Napa Auto Parts and Noel Miller, right? It's on Highland.
Right, it's on Highland. The building, the original building was on the California Drive side. That was Noel Miller at that time was, I think, Slocum Chevrolet, and then it was a Hudson dealer in the 40s. Our building started out as Pacific Auto Repair. It is the first reinforced concrete building west of the Mississippi. I think Jennifer may have gotten a picture of the article. There was a newspaper clipping Dad saved, and I have that.
Yeah.
And so Grandpa started there in 23. And at some point during the late 20s, he was going bankrupt, and so he figured he would be better. Grandpa wasn't the best businessman. He kind of learned from the school of hard knocks. He did better just leasing the building out, and then once he got sort of financially on his feet, he built the building behind Burlingame, what is now Burlingame Auto Supply, and that we're on the Highland Avenue side. And that's where we are today, and been there since probably I think that building went up in 28 or 29.
Yeah. Did Grandpa work on cars?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so what kind of cars are back in the early 20s, like a Model A or a Model T or whatever?
Model Ts, Model As, cars we don't see or hear of much, like Moon was a car maker. There's a Franklin.
What was the life expectancy of a car back then? I mean, did it get 1,000 miles or 2,000 miles? I mean, did they wear out all the time?
They wore out a lot quicker. They were pretty crude, and the materials and lubricants and things they used were not that good.
Yeah.
You know, if you got 50, 60, 70,000 miles, that was about all you were going to get out of it before it needed to be an overhaul.
Was there something that, was there one thing that went out all the time? Was there a common, the engine blew or the tires? Was there one thing that stood out as far with the older cars like that?
Well, of course, those cars were before my time, but I know tires were always a big issue. And then and again, during the war, you couldn't get rubber. I remember Grandpa telling me about that. But during the 60s, growing up and being down at the shop on weekends, helping Dad clean up, and into the 70s, the biggest things we found with cars, a lot of rusted out exhaust systems because of the amount of moisture that was going through the engines, transmission failures, water pump failures, cars needed valve jobs. There was tremendous amount of work that we don't even hardly see anymore now.
Yeah. How did Grandpa learn the trade?
He always had an interest in electrical and mechanical things, and I don't think he had any formal training. He just kind of picked up. And I mean, cars, they were much simpler then, but you just had to have that knack. You had to be able to look at something and say, oh, okay, take it apart, learn how it works.
Yeah. Did he have competition? Was there other competing auto repair places in the area?
I don't think there were. There was a couple dealerships I know in Burlingame, and then right next to Grandpa was a dealership. But then that in the 40s, his peer was Noel Miller, and I remember Noel Miller. And Noel worked there as a kid, and then bought. I think when Hudson pulled out, then he bought the building and started his business, Noel Miller.
Yeah. So you knew Noel Miller.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Richard DeMille, didn't he have a partner, Richard DeMille, at one time?
Richard has a partner. Richard recently passed away. Richard's my dad's age. And so you had Herb and Noel, about that same generation. And then Richard started working there after school. No family relation. And Richard eventually bought in half and then ended up buying the whole entire business. And then Steven Soma, who's close to my age, same thing, started working there after school, and he became now the sole owner. Whereas it's sort of the same progression from Herb to Walt to me, except we were all in the same family.
Yeah, right. Whatever happened to Noel Miller? Is he still alive?
He passed long before my grandfather passed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think that's important for all our listeners to know when they drive down California Drive. It still says Noel Miller, right?
Right.
Yeah. So people must know, who's Noel Miller? Well, okay. He was there a long time.
Yeah, that was his business. And when Richard took over, they just kept the name, Noel Miller Incorporated.
Yeah.
If you look underneath, it says R. DeMelli, S. Soma. I think Richard's name may still be up there.
Okay. Your grandfather had it for how many years before he turned it over to your dad?
Grandpa turned it over to Dad in 1965.
And was your dad doing the same thing you were kind of doing, coming in after school, working there on summer vacations, the whole bit?
Dad would be down there, right, kind of the same thing. Dad took over. Dad went to work full-time after he got out of the Army. Dad did his stint in Korea. serviced vehicles in Korea. He was that was in ordnance. That was the department he was in, and he got out of Korea in 52 or 53, and then went to work for Grandpa, and then took over in 65. And then Dad made a lot of changes, just a lot more efficient changes. I remember which is now the kind of the computer room / library, although everything's on the computer now. And that information's in my office, so I don't use the so-called computer room. There used to be a stock room, and I just remember there were parts and there's stuff on the floor. You'd be walking on it. It was just very chaotic. Dad put all the organization into it.
As your dad took over, did Grandpa kind of hang around and observe, or would he come down to the shop every day, that kind of thing?
Every day. He was there every day.
Yeah.
And he would work on, if he wasn't working on his own personal little projects, he would, Dad would say, hey, Pop, I need you to do this, or go up to here, pick this up for me, do that. And then I would go with Grandpa, and he would show me the different places he would go and meet different vendors and things of that nature.
Would you, if you needed parts, would you run across the street to Don L. Morris? Remember that place on California?
Don L. Morris Federal Auto Parts. The medical
would you get
building.
Supplies from them?
We get from them. We get a lot from Burlingame Auto Parts because they were the closest, and being their landlord, we wanted to support them.
Right. Are they still around? I'm blanking right now. Are they still in business?
Yeah, now it's all under the Napa.
Oh, it's
Napa
under the
name.
Napa. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's what I think when I see it. Right. Okay.
It was Marshall Auto Parts during the 50s, and then in the very early 60s, a gentleman by the name of Del Donk. Real name. I remember as a kid going in his office, seeing his nameplate, thinking, "Is this a spoof or is this for real?" Right? No, Mr. Donk ran. He bought into the Napa franchise and started Napa Auto Parts.
Okay. So Jennifer, Jennifer Pfaff, the president of the Burlingame Historical Society. She wanted me to ask you something about Spreckles Dairy, which I think was around the block from you guys. Right. Something to do with refrigeration. Does that ring a bell?
Oh yeah. So this started with when Herb had it, and then it transitioned to Walt. The trucks at night had to be, because they were refrigerator trucks, and they had to be plugged in at night. And so Spreckles paid us to park the trucks in the shop at night, and then we'd plug into had a bunch of 240, 220 outlets all throughout the shop. And we'd park 4 or 5 of those trucks in the shop overnight, and they'd be plugged in so they'd stay cold. And then in the morning, we'd bring them all out, and their Spreckles people would take them away. We wouldn't see them again until the end of the day.
Right.
So I remember as a kid, I was too young to move cars then, but I just remember all the trucks coming into the shop. And because we had that rapport with them on Saturdays, if they were cleaning up, it'd be a real treat. We'd go to it's not that Japanese restaurant, but right there in the corner of Howard and Highland, they had like a little walk-in soda fountain.
Yep.
And it had one of those fans on the ceiling that turned about just fast enough where the flies could hang on to it.
Yep.
And we would go in there, and I'd get a milkshake, and I remember and they would give Dad free ice cream.
Yeah. Sort of a payback, right?
Yeah. I remember going in. They had a great big walk-in freezer, and I remember get to go see that as a kid. It was really fascinating.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that Spreckles Dairy was around the block on Howard, and going the other way, east, across
was Borden's
on the corner of California and Howard. Yeah. Pretty cool back then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right, Gary, we're going to talk shop. Okay?
All right.
You have some amazing testimonials and 5 stars and 4 stars and all that good stuff on your website and not YouTube, but Yelp and all that good stuff. Obviously, you've made a lot of customers in 100 years, and I think, kids of the parents that were taking their cars are now taking their cars there if they're still in the area. You know what I mean?
We have some of those, yeah.
Pretty amazing. So
I have one customer left that was my grandfather's customer.
Really? That's crazy.
Yeah.
That is crazy. What's the most common repair job that you come up with? What's the most common issue when somebody brings in a car? I'd say I do a tremendous amount of oil services because cars are really come a long ways. They're a lot better than they've ever been, a lot cleaner, a lot more reliable. So they don't need a lot.
I would say oil change followed by check engine light and smog issues. Car won't pass smog because the light's on, so we need to find out, okay, why is the light on, and correct that.
You don't deal with smog, though. You don't do any smog testing there or passing, right?
We did smog. We started when the program started in the 60s, and at that time it was more, I think it was more information gathering, because I remember doing smogs. You didn't need a license. You just had to have a gas analyzer, and we would just record numbers on a little ticket book, and we'd submit those to the state.
Yeah.
And then in the late 70s, early 80s, they started the program, and we stayed with it right up to, it's probably been 10 years now or more. It was tough for a shop, because as a shop you had the smog, and then you had to fix the car. People were going to the test only stations because it was a lot cheaper. And it was cheaper because all they had to do is pass or fail it. They didn't have to maintain a library, the tools, or the knowledge to fix the problem. They just, your car failed. Oh, what do I do? I'll take it to a shop and get it fixed. So that's what we did.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. But I've got a guy who rents from me now, Sam's, who was on Broadway on El Camino. He'd been there forever.
Exactly where he was. He moved into your place?
He's on the one stall that I don't use.
I took my car to him.
Oh, okay.
That's funny. So he's moved.
Yeah, he's down in Sam he's a great guy. Everybody knows him in town, and he has quite a following. And so everybody comes to Pacific Auto now to see Sam. So Sam does the smogs, and if there's a problem, then they have the option to talk to me and see if we can help them with it.
You have a lot of customers. You've done very well. But you have a lot of competition. There's a lot of competition on California and here and there, and et cetera, et cetera. What separates your store? What separates your shop from these other guys?
I think it really is the customer experience. I think there are a lot of excellent shops. We call it bedside manner, just like a doctor. People come to you if they're comfortable with you, and if you treat them right and they feel like they've got good value for the money they spent, they come back.
Yeah.
So there's two kinds of customers. There's ones that are shopping, they're just strictly looking for price. And most of your really good shops, pretty much, those people don't end up going there, because for someone that knows what they're doing and be able to service a customer appropriately, you can't do it cheap. Because if you're doing it cheap, you're leaving something out. Somebody's not going to be happy. So what sets me apart, I guess, is it's really the interaction with the customer. Do they feel comfortable with me? And once you feel you've built a rapport or a trust, then you go back to that person.
Trust is what is the magic word when it comes to the customer and the mechanic. Okay, you got to be able to trust that guy.
Absolutely. Cars are too complicated, and life is complicated enough. And you go someplace, you got a problem. It's like, God, I got to deal with. You don't wake up in the morning thinking, oh, I think I'm going to get my timing belt done, or I'm going to do this. It's like, my car didn't start, or a light came on. I got to go somebody I can drop it off and feel comfortable.
Know that I'll be taken care of. Yeah. Do you have a preference on working on domestic or imported vehicles?
As I've got older and crotchetier, yes. I prefer the Asian and domestic cars. And even in those groups, there's subgroups of cars that I don't care for. The European cars I tend to been staying away from more and more, mainly because they tend to be over-engineered. They get to be very complicated, and there's some very specialized tools you have to have, and the software for them and the tooling is extremely expensive. And unless you're doing a lot of them, it just doesn't pay.
Yeah. So when you say European, you're referencing maybe a Jaguar, a BMW, something like that?
Jaguars.
Volkswagen?
You can make a lot of money on Volkswagens because they break a lot.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I don't know if it's appropriate to give you my impression of what are good cars and bad cars.
Why not? Yeah.
Well, I think your best value is going to be pretty much any of the Asian cars, followed by the domestic cars. The worst cars, as far as reliability and for cost of ownership, as far as maintaining and being cheap, any English cars, Land Rover, Jaguar, they're beautiful cars, but they're absolutely terrible mechanically.
No kidding.
Mini Coopers, Audi, Volkswagen. I will say with Mercedes and BMW, they're a good product. They're built well, but they have a lot of proprietary because everything is now software driven, it's extremely expensive to get the software you need to plug in and be able to correctly diagnose these cars. So I don't do a lot of. There's a lot of things I do on those cars, but if I'm not comfortable or something I don't feel I'm going to service my customer to their advantage, I have places I can send them to.
Yeah, you kind of answered my next question, because it was going to say, are there models or makes that you absolutely will not work on? And I think you just answered that. So you kind of stay away from the European stuff.
Yeah.
If you have a good buddy, will you do it? I mean, if Ray here was driving a Jag, and wanted to be taken care of, what do you think?
Maybe. Okay. It depends what it is. I mean, with European cars, there's certain jobs that are like some of the more like the oil changes. That's not so much a problem. Doing brakes are very lucrative on those cars because you have to replace everything on them, and the parts are very expensive.
Yeah.
And it's very straightforward. And I do have the software for the electronic brakes because they're all electric parking brakes now. So a lot of the running maintenance I'll do. We started getting into more specialized things like theft deterrent things or certain. Climate control issues, then it just depends what it is. I'll look at it and figure, okay, is this something I want to get into, or do I want to pass the ball?
Right. So the world is evolving into the EVs, the electronic vehicles, and the hybrids, right? Mm-hmm. Is that having much of an impact one way or the other on your business?
I really haven't seen much. We do a lot of hybrid work. And from the standpoint of, hybrids still are a gasoline engine, but they're very reliable. Those are really good cars. I've done a couple Teslas. I've got some customers with Teslas, but it's mostly tire repair. Brakes on both hybrids and EV cars tend to last a long time because you have regenerative braking. So we don't really see a lot of.
How do you stay on top of all this all these tech changes?
There's trade publications. There's a lot of classes offered, and you try to pick up a class here or there, and you learn more. And you never learn it all. That's what makes the business interesting. There's always something new, and I can always tell someone if I'm talking to a fellow mechanic or technician, and the words, things that red flags to me are like, I've never seen that, so therefore it can't happen, right? It's like, no. Or words like, all Fords are fill in the blank, all Chevys are fill in the blank. No. My professor in college said that was his line, especially when they came out with the second generation onboard diagnostics. He said, there's three things you live by, and he's absolutely right. These things are sometimes, not always, and in most cases. There is no hard, fast, they're all this, they're all that. No, it's kind of like, I think with a doctor with people, one patient responds differently to a medication than someone else. Cars there's a lot of common problems, but then there's weird problems that are unique to that car or things that you've never seen before.
Yeah. Speaking of that college course that you took, was that a 2-year automotive?
Yeah.
And you got certified and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that was way back then, and so there was no electronic vehicles or hybrids back then, right?
No, but what they taught you was it gave you a good grounding and understanding of, with this business, you need that practical experience. And the problem is if you don't go to school, it's so hard to find out, okay, how does a differential work? How does a transmission work? What's inside a carburetor? How does this work? How does that work?
Yeah.
And you take the time to take these things apart, understand the theories and the concepts, because those same concepts and theories run right up through today. With your anti-lock brake systems, it's still a magnet and a piece of iron rotating, and that's your speed sensor. And that same, it goes into other sensors, and
right.
So you have you have a very baseline understanding how these things, how they work. So it's real easy to pick up then put it together. How it fits in on a newer car.
Do you have a bunch of certifications and things on how to do things? I mean, like if I walked into your shop, do you have what they call the ego wall with all the plaques and stuff like that? Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's certifications, right?
Yeah.
Do you have constantly being upgraded and learning more?
I have all my ASCs, the Automotive Service Councils. There's a voluntary organization. And I always felt it was good to have those credentials, that if you ever were in a situation someone was questioning your integrity or authority on something, this at least, because in this society, you have to show what you know. If you didn't go to school or didn't graduate high school or didn't go to college or don't have a degree, it's like, well, who are you? Well, that's true to a point. But I went ahead and I got all my certifications. I have the Master Tech certification, which is all the ones underneath it. And then there's what they call the L1, which is advanced. It's kind of like cars today, which actually the testing, I love the tests because they're the best written tests. I also have to do state testing for certification for brake and light certifications, which we do. A lot of folks don't do. But they're testing in the way is really well thought out because they give you, it's easy in the sense that they give you a book where they call it the composite vehicle, and and there's a page with all the sensors, all the specifications. You got a wiring diagram, and so it's so easy. Oh, okay, this is the range I'm looking for. This sensor, it's located here. When you're working on a real car, a lot of that information is not that easily obtained.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
All right, Gary. I'm going to bring my car in tomorrow for a tune-up. Okay.
No, we don't work on those. No.
What's the turnaround going to be? What are you going to tell me? A Mark pick it up in 48, 24 at the end of the week?
No, pick up at the end of the day. I try not to overbook myself, so you want to be able to, accountability is huge.
Yeah.
So if you tell somebody end of the day, you sure want to try to do it by the end of the day. And if it looks like that's not going to happen, I'm on the phone saying, "Hey, Mark, we ran into this problem here. It looks like it's going to be tomorrow."
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the most challenging repair job you've ever had to do? Like, for example, and I don't even know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to make this up on the fly, taking a 357 Chevy engine and dropping it into a Ford Mustang. I mean, was that like give me an example of one of the largest, repair jobs you ever had to mess with?
Well, that would be a challenge. I don't Dad used to take on those jobs because when you start mixing and matching and changing things, you run into things you never even dreamed you had, and it's like, unless you really enjoy doing that and have the time, that's great. But those are jobs I do not want to touch with a 10-foot pole because you can't charge for the time that you have involved. The most challenging job is probably like what I'm doing right now with my wife's 2013 Lexus ES350. The tire pressure light's on. I've got all new tire pressure sensors in there. They're all recorded. They're all there. The computer's not seeing them for some reason, and so I'm trying to figure out, okay, why does the computer not recognize them? What happened? So that's challenging.
Okay. So speaking of your wife's Lexus, there's a lot of new cars out there, right? People are driving new cars and with long warranties, I think. 100,000-mile warranties or 4-year warranty, whatever they are. Mm-hmm. What's the average age of a car when it reaches you?
I would say the average age is probably about 5 years, 5 to 6 years.
Yeah.
A lot of people think they have to take their car back to the dealer to keep their warranty valid. That's not true, and it's certainly not true in California, and I think as most of the United States. You can go anywhere you want. It won't void your warranty. The only thing that will void your warranty if you didn't service a system or did something that they specifically require you to do, or use an inappropriate oil. Some cars are very sensitive to the types of oils that you put in. So, our cars tend to be not that old. I get a lot of 2015, 16s, probably about 15, 16s and back. And much past about 1999, I don't see anymore. So that's sort of the range I'm working with.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, nothing from the 90s or 80s or anything like, because that was going to be one of my questions. What's the oldest car you're currently working on?
Very few. The oldest car I've currently got in the shop is a 99. I've had cars that were much older. We did an engine for a lady with her 47 Dodge. But, I took it in some of these older cars, and I did a lady's Cadillac. It was a 69, got that running. Those kinds of cars, whether if you've got time and you're not running a business, they can be fun. But when you've got deadlines and you're trying to get things done and you're working on old cars that it takes a long time to find parts. To work on them takes twice as long. Everybody says they're simpler. They are and they aren't. Those cars were built by hand. So you can't use any power tools on them. Everything is wrenches, and you're just
Wow.
What would take you maybe 3 minutes on a modern car, you might be into it for 3/4 of an hour on some old car like one of those.
Kidding.
So it's like, and again, it's a time thing. I mean, how much is a customer going to really want to pay? And you feel guilty. It's like you're into it for an hour. You can't charge them for an hour, but then at the end of the day, you also have to account for your time.
Right.
So I tend to stay away from a lot of these older cars because just for that reason, it just doesn't pay.
Yeah. Do you ever get guys that bring in? Well, when I was young, 100 years ago, right? A lot of us had cars that we would customize, like a '57 Chevy and blah blah blah. Do you ever run into that kind of stuff?
I get a few. The problem again with custom cars is they're custom.
Yeah.
So if there's a problem, it's locating the part because the part maybe didn't originally go on that car. You don't know what somebody's done, wiring wise. There's no reference material. So again, it turns into a big, let's take this apart. Let's trace this out. You just chew up so much time trying to figure something out.
Can be an all-day affair.
Exactly. So I tend to stay away from. I mean, it's a lucrative business, but if that's all you do, that's one thing. But if I've got your car you're getting a tune-up done, and I've got some car that I've got to literally start from scratch on, your car's not going to get done.
Right. Okay, let's talk about not really my favorite subject, but I do talk about it with different business people because it's had such an impact on our lives. The pandemic, 20 to 22, give or take the time, right? It certainly had an impact on what I did. I worked at Molly Stone's and nothing but crazy every day for 2 years, right?
Yeah.
How did it affect your business? People weren't driving to work. They were hanging out. Was it good, bad, or indifferent for you?
All three. It started when this whole thing really broke out. I didn't go to work for probably close to 3 weeks. And the first, and here it is. I always kept thinking every day you go to work, and as you know, being a manager and you go home with it, you go to work with it, you're just worn out. And I'm thinking, I can't wait till I retire. I can't wait till I retire. Well, the first 2 weeks at home, I kept myself real busy. And then I got really bored.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I can see when that day comes. I'm not one of these guys that's going to go and sit and fish or watch TV or just rake. Like I had a neighbor, I remember in Burlingame, he would shake the tree so the leaves would come down, then he'd rake them up. And it's like, no, I can't do that.
I'm not going to do that.
No. So we were very fortunate in that everybody still needed a car. There were a lot of people that needed to drive. There were a lot of delivery people that needed work. We sold a lot of batteries because cars did a lot of sitting and batteries would die, and so did a lot of that. The really hard part was you wipe this down, you mask up, you stay out of the office, and the whole contactless. It took a lot out of everybody. It was hard, and I think we've sort of evolved now. We're used to it, and there's precautions you take.
Yeah.
But it was absolutely crazy in the beginning.
So you stayed away for 3 weeks. You shut it down for 3 weeks, right? Were you getting phone calls or emails or texts or anything like that from people, from your customers?
A few, but I think most people, those first couple weeks,
everybody just went into hiding.
Yeah, literally everything.
Right.
And that was the other hard part. If you were home, it's like you didn't go in the grocery store, but they had the home deliveries.
Right.
That got real popular. You couldn't go and do anything. Instacart.
Uh-huh.
And everything was closed. But that's where the Zoom meetings that really took off, and which we can talk about later. Because I do the Zoom has been great. But yeah, it was just for a very short period, and then I got back into it, and it was I wouldn't say. It wasn't that much less busier, I should say.
Okay, good.
There was still stuff, people needed their cars. And of course, the first thing, the car would come to the shop on the tow truck because the battery was dead.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because we had businesses around us on Burlingame Ave, et cetera, that didn't come out of it.
Oh, I think the service industry, we're a service industry, but like the restaurant business.
And the hotels.
Oh, God, yeah. Hotel travel. I remember a lot of, because we do the brake and light certifications, I get a lot of cabs and any vehicle that goes to the airport, limos, cabs, Ubers. They need, maybe not the Lyft and Uber, maybe not them, but they need brake certifications from the airport. And so, those guys were dying. They were hurting because I remember talking to them.
Yeah. All right. So I have a brand new car, and I'm going to come to you. And what's the best advice you can give me to keep my car at peak performance?
Best advice?
When that little red light comes on, do something about it. Just don't put a Band-Aid over it.
Right. No, I tell people, your owner's manual says one thing, your service advisor at the dealership will say another. I tell people, as a rule of thumb, almost every car now is synthetic oil. A conservative figure for synthetic oil, I tell people 6 months or 6,000 miles. I mean, if a lot of people think, well, they drive around town, they drop the kids off, or they're just stop and go all day long, and that is the hardest driving on your car. People don't realize that. And that's where I tell them that's where you want to come in every 6 months. If you're commuting to San Francisco or San Jose or a salesperson, you're on the road a lot, 6,000 miles works. Because I have customers that can't put 6,000 miles on in a year.
Right.
But if they left their oil in that long, I mean, you can get away with it with a synthetic, but if you want to take the best care of it, bring it in 6 months. Let's change the oil, check the tires, belts, hoses, just kind of give it a once over.
Kind of like seeing the dentist twice a year.
Yeah, it's preventative maintenance.
Right.
That would be the best advice is do that.
Okay.
Get second opinions, especially with dealerships. You go through a service writer who's paid a commission on what he sells you, so they don't always have the most objective view of what you need. So just things to be thinking about.
Yeah. Okay. So that tune-up you're going to give me tomorrow, we're going to fast forward to next week. My car's running rough, and I just paid $500, man. What do I do? Give you a call and say, Gary, I'm bringing it back. Something's wrong here, right? I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to take care of me, or what's the deal?
So, we're going to say, first we'll say we're very sorry to hear that. Nobody wants that. Let's get the car and let's see what happened.
Right.
Is it something that's tune-up related, something that I did, or is it something that's not related? Obviously, if it's something that looks like I need to address that I'm responsible for, we'll take care of it. If it's something that's not, and that's a very good question, because that's where the bedside manner comes in.
Yep.
And it's really, those are difficult problems, because you bring and I'll use the example, that's a good example. Another example would be like, if my car didn't start, well, because your battery was dead because you needed an alternator. So you take care of that, and a week later or a day later, it doesn't start. This time it's the starter. And of course, well, how come you didn't check that? Well, we did, but it was fine. You can't fix something if it's not broken.
Right, yep.
And you don't have a crystal ball, so you can't foresee things. So with cars, there are a lot of things that have the same symptom but different root causes.
Yeah.
So if you had rough running, it depends what was causing that rough running. Maybe something failed in your emission system and it wasn't getting the correct air-fuel mixture, and so it was causing it to run rough. Well, tune-up is that's maintenance. That's replacing parts that wear out. You don't replace sensors unless there's a problem with them, or if there's some known problem that you change it every so many thousand miles, and you do that as a maintenance item. Otherwise, you pretty much just wait until it breaks.
Okay.
Or another good one is people will say, "Oh, I spent all this money." Let's say you, especially like on European cars, you spend a ton of money on brakes that you wouldn't spend if you had a domestic or an Asian car. And they might say, "Oh, I spent all this money, so I feel good now. Now, what else could possibly happen?" And then you think to yourself, "Oh my God, don't say that. I mean, anything can happen at any time."
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many other systems on that car that, like I said, it'd be like, I use the analogy: you go home and you just had an electrician do your house and all new lighting, everything's great, but that doesn't mean you turn your kitchen light on and the light bulb burns out.
Yeah, right.
Okay, it just
things happen.
Right.
Yeah,
things happen.
All right, going back to Skyline again for a moment. where you learned you got your degree there in automotive engineering, I guess it's called. Is that what it was?
Automotive technology, they call it. Yeah.
Okay. What advice do you have for a young person that might be seeking a career in the automotive repair industry?
Don't do it. No, just kidding. Best advice would be try to get a job where you've got exposure around cars, but go to school. Learn the fundamentals. That's huge, because when you're working, you don't have time to learn that. You're expected to do a job in a timely fashion, and they're not there to teach you. I mean, they will. Some places were pretty good about that, but as like all businesses, they're looking at the clock. They're looking at they're paying you, and things have to move at a rate that's sustainable for the business. And you're not gonna. It's really hard to learn under those conditions. So. And not all employers will take the time to teach you and walk you through things. Mm-hmm. There's lots of learning opportunities there, but what the beauty with Skyline, what they're offering, it's basically 4 hours a day, so you can work in the mornings and go to school in the afternoons, mm-hmm. or vice versa, or it's a tough grind, but you can also maybe do it at night. But if you're going to get in this business and really want to make yourself something in it. Don't try to just do it on your own and go to work and not go to school. Take the time to go to school. That's huge. I can remember Dad telling me he wouldn't hire me unless I did the school.
Right.
And I'm kind of like, yeah. I knew in the back of my mind, okay, I'm going to learn something. But I'm thinking, am I going to learn that much? Because I was around cars. I just felt comfortable with them. No, you learn a lot. It's huge. Yeah. You don't want to forego that.
Besides Skyline, are there automotive institutes that people can go to?
Oh yeah, there's schools in Arizona. There's schools I think over in Hayward. There's a lot.
Do they help
schools.
Place you when it's all said and done? I mean, do they help?
I think most
do.
Yeah.
Job search.
Yeah.
Right. Do most guys, when they come out of those things, go to work for big shops like dealerships, Toyota, Ford, GM? I mean,
probably,
is that where they end up?
Probably mostly dealerships, because dealerships will take a lot of entry level folks. Working at a dealership. I've never had to work at a dealership, but it's tough because they don't pay you that well unless you're one of their top mechanics, and they're not forgiving at all as far as you're given so much time to do an oil change, let's say.
Yeah.
And there's no way you can do an oil change in the time they give you. And that's just the way it is, and they pay you based on that.
Wow.
And so people get discouraged real quick and leave dealerships. So dealerships get a lot of
turnover.
They have a lot of turnover. They have some really good techs. They have a lot of very inexperienced techs, because once you get really good and you know what you're doing, now you're marketable, you're worth something, and you're going to probably go to work for an independent who appreciates what you have, the knowledge you have, or a lot of guys will start their own business.
Yeah.
But then running a business, being good at fixing cars and being good at running a business are
two different things,
total
man.
Different
Absolutely.
disciplines. Yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah.
Gary, we're like 50 minutes into this, and this is the point where I'm going to let you do a little shout out to your wife and your kids and that kind of thing. So how long have you been married?
I think about 35 years now.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And you mentioned you have a couple of kids?
Got 2 kids. My oldest, Kevin, is 35, and my daughter, Elena, I think she's 33.
Great.
So, yeah, shout out to Debbie, my wife. I love her dearly, and my 2 children, and very blessed to have them in my life, and a happy family. And
you got to have a strong wife when you're an independent businessman.
Yeah, so she's
a lot.
Well, and she's learning about being an independent businesswoman now because she's got her education consulting business.
Great.
So, yeah.
Great. So when you're not at the shop, okay, and now you got a day off or a weekend off or whatever, because you're closed weekends, right?
Closed weekends, and I've been taking Fridays off and closed Fridays now. That mainly just because working myself, I wear all the hats.
Yeah.
And I'm just exhausted at the end of the day.
Sure, you got to take some time away. What do you do when you take the time away? Are you still following the trains and things like that?
Not too much of the trains after Southern Pacific merged, and a lot of what I grew up with has changed. So I'm not, and I used to do a lot of photography. Of course, you don't use film anymore, and I have my digital camera on my phone, which works great. I follow them a little bit. I'm not as active in that hobby as I used to be. I did about a 10-year stint. I built and flew rockets, and started in Ray Park at the school, and graduated till we went out to Black Rock, and I made 30,000 feet. So I'm happy.
Wow, Mr. Musk, move over.
Yeah, I learned. It was a great learning experience. It was a lot of fun, a lot of interesting people, great hobby. Really enjoyed it. And then that morphed into we took some friends out, and they really enjoyed it. And you're out in the desert, and so we're and this guy we brought with us never shot a gun before, so we brought some handguns, and he thought that was really fun. So we go out there now, and we do precision rifle shooting. I've shot out to 1,000 yards, and I have a place. We have a place up in the Santa Cruz Mountains. I have a little range set up there, and I enjoy shooting there.
Yeah, that's great. There are no shooting ranges around here. I think the wonderful one at Coyote Point is now just for law enforcement officers.
No, it's open to the public.
Oh, it is.
It's best kept secret.
No kidding.
You have to go on the website. You can schedule a time. They are limiting rifle only, 100 yards center fire. Hopefully, so at some point we'll open it up to the public. It's.
So you actually can make an appointment and go over there and fire your weapon.
You can, yes.
That's great information.
You do everything online. Yeah.
Terrific. Okay. Any thoughts on retirement?
I think about it all the time, and I'm more thinking about what I'm going to do. So I haven't quite decided. Not sure. I do have a NRA certification in pistol instruction, so that would be fun. But I may go to the college for automotive, teach. I enjoy helping people with cars and teaching them and sharing my knowledge and what I learned.
So if you did retire, you would put the shop up for sale and have somebody come in and try to buy it? Is that how it would end up?
Yeah, what? I think unfortunately, with this day and age, the land value is so high now. I don't think I could afford to be in business and pay the property taxes.
Okay.
So we kind of ran numbers and looked at that and thought, and initially I envisioned myself retiring and maybe going in there and puttering, working on my own stuff and having somebody else take over the business and let them do their thing. But I think I have two sisters, so I think we would liquidate the property and sell it off. So that would be,
and then it becomes a high rise or something.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a great option, Gary. It's a wonderful.
Oh yeah, it's kind of sad because it could stay as an auto repair business, but these kinds of businesses, if we didn't own the land we were in or the building, we wouldn't be there today.
Yeah. Boy, I couldn't afford to live in the house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway. So before we wrap it up, how about telling our listeners again where the shop is located and the hours of operation?
So we're there Monday through Thursday, 8 till 5:30. We are at 124 Highland between Howard and Bayswater. So easy to find because I tell people that everybody knows where Burlingame Avenue is, the train station. I say, well, you go one block south to Howard, and then you make that, as you're going south on California, make that right turn, and Highland is your first left. And you probably won't see the sign because it's very small.
Yeah, it is, but it's great. Been there, 101 years.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Gary, thanks for being here today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You bet.
That was great.
I'd like to thank Gary Vielbaum, owner of Pacific Auto Repair, for being my guest today on Burlingame. It's a small town podcast sponsored by the Burlingame Historical Society. Thanks to Kathy and Shelby Lucchese for editing and producing, the great Ray Tyler for video, original music by Bray. You can hear more of Bray at braymusic.com. This podcast was recorded on Friday, February 23rd, 2024 at the Burlingame Public Library. The Burlingame Historical Society copyrights this recording, and no part can be copied or replayed without the permission of the Burlingame Historical Society. So until next time, everyone, see you around Burlingame. It's a small town.